Someone had to say it. Welcome back to Someone Had to Say It. On today's episode, Heidi and I interviewed a best-selling and one of our favorite authors, Rochelle B. Weinstein. Her new book just came out this week called We Are Made of Stars. We discussed the background of her writing journey, how she went from self-publishing to having many book deals, the inspiration behind her novels, and what it takes to write a bestseller. We hope you enjoy her story as much as we enjoyed it. And as always, please listen, subscribe if you haven't, and rate us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Thank you for listening and enjoy. Welcome back, everyone, to Someone Had to Say It. Welcome back to my co-host, Heidi Shertok. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to join you. I love recording with you, Julia.
Oh, yay. Well, thank God. We have a very, very, very special guest, Rochelle B. Weinstein, who is an author, a best-selling author, not just an author. And I have 3 of her books here. Actually, I'm going to pull them out. We'll talk about it in a minute, but welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And Julia, to see you and meet you. And Heidi, we've worked on being Jewish now, right?
I know. It was such a nice experience. I keep wondering if there's going to be a sequel to that.
Yeah, so it's wonderful to be here with you and to chit chat today.
Yeah, I think it's I've wanted to reach out to you for a long time because I've loved your books, and obviously my goal, not just for the past 15 months, has been to bring on Jewish authors, but Jewish voices in general. And I reached out to Heidi the same way, and she was like, heck yeah, let's do this. Which honestly, whenever an author, especially a best-selling author, responds back, I'm always shocked. Like, really? And then
there's a nice bunch of us. There's a nice bunch of us, and this is honestly what we do for each other. And I think you'll see. And maybe it's like a Jewish thing. I don't even know, but we get a lot more pleasure, I think, supporting each other than touting our own books. Like there's something just much more gratifying to help someone else.
Right. Yeah. Well, and speaking of which, as someone who has been looking for an agent and a book deal for a long time, I want to start with how you went from being a self-published author. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of the same questions this week. Your
it's okay.
book just came out, so we're going to try to ask different questions. But of course, the biggest one.
This is an important one, and I like to actually share this story because I oftentimes say with my own humility that this story is better than some of my actual novels that you can buy, because I feel like it's such an important story of resiliency and determination. And Julia, you just said that you're on this journey right now, and of course, whatever Heidi and I can do for you, we will. But it's you. So I was always a journal writer, and I was a private writer, my own private musings, but I was also a voracious reader. And I was the baby of 4, and my parents were divorced, and I was a latchkey kid, and it was a loving home filled with people, and there's 4 kids, lots of activity, but I felt alone a lot of the time, and I just immersed myself in books and reading, and I was transported to other places, and I never imagined that was something that I could do for a career. I just, my writing was so private and personal, and quite frankly, I didn't think I was even good enough to do it professionally. So I went into actually the advertising, marketing, and promotion sector, which ended up helping me when I launched books. But I went to the journalism school in Maryland, and I lived in California, and I worked for the LA Weekly. Again, never on the editorial side. I was on the advertising, marketing, promotion side. And then I moved back to Miami, and I was working for a music network called The Box, and I was in charge of every single record label in the country, their advertising and marketing on our channel. And it was an insane job for a 20-something-year-old. I was meeting Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake and Dave,
Wow.
So it was really cool. My kids like to say, wow, that was a really cool job. Cooler than being an author, probably. But I'd always worked, and I was still writing in my journals. And the company was bought by MTV2. It was bought by Viacom, and it became MTV2. And they offered me my job in New York, and I had just had my twin sons. And we all know that you don't take your grandbabies away from the grandparents, and all the grandparents were in Miami. So there was no chance of me leaving to go to New York. So I took the severance package, which was for a year, which was incredible. But at the same time, I was at a career crossroads because I'd always been working my whole life. I'd been working since I was 14. And wow. I had a lot of emotion about this stage in my life, and a lot of things that I'd learned, a lot of things that I gleaned from my own experiences with just life. And I literally sat down at the age of 29, 30, and I wrote 110,000 words, became my first novel, What We Leave Behind. It was a complete lark. It sat under the bed for months, years. And one of the carpool moms at my school begged me to let her book club read it. And I was completely horrified at the notion, but I did it. And thank God that I did, because they were like, this is really good. You should really think about getting an agent. So like you, I set out, and this was like early 2000s, to find an agent. But, social media wasn't really very active or even alive at that point. And I was sending queries like through snail mail. Like, we weren't even going on websites and whatnot. And there wasn't, like, the market saturation wasn't what it was. And it was just different back then. And I feel like that was like sort of the beginning of the end of publishing like that traditional way. And I was rejected enough to wallpaper an entire bathroom with query letters. And that's when the wave of self-publishing came to be. And I just, I teach a class at Nova, and I'm sorry, this is becoming a very long answer, but
it's good.
I teach a class at Nova Southeastern University at the library there. And the first thing I say to my students is, what is your goal for your writing? Like, what do you want to get out of it? Because I really think that helps with, getting there, understanding what you want. And there's people who want to be a New York Times bestseller, and there's people that want to make millions, and there's people that just want their book to give to their family and their friends and print it out. And I think that it really helps to really, uncover the layers and figure out, what it is exactly that you want. I knew that I didn't have any like delusions of New York Times or making millions off my books. I wrote because I had something to say, and I had feelings about it, and I wanted to share it with my friends and family. And that was pretty much it. Fast forward, and I took my advertising, marketing, and promotional background, and I self-published that first book, and it did amazingly well. And
wow. That's unique right there.
It did really well. But again, I stressed it by saying the market wasn't there. It wasn't saturated the way it was. It was the beginning of self-publishing, and people were just, don't forget, people were, why are you doing this? There's no credibility in self-publishing, and, you're just not good enough. And, you have to have thick skin in this business. And I was very clear about what I wanted. So I did it, and the book soared. And then I had written a second book, and I self-published that one also. And I ended up using the success of those two books to finally get an agent. And that was the agent who got me to Lake Union Publishing. And it was only, and then with them, I had Where We Fall. And then once we were working on Somebody's Daughter, which was my fourth novel, but my second with the publishing house, I went on Publishers Marketplace, and I finally enrolled, and I was checking out, agents and editors. And I Googled my name. I mean, I searched for my name, and I was so shocked to find that What We Leave Behind had hit the USA Today bestseller list, and I never knew it.
Wow.
And
Isn't that funny?
I never knew it. I found out on a Thursday. I was like, wow, this is a real Throwback Thursday. And the whole arc of this very long story is I did not have that accolade or that milestone to buoy me through some of the most difficult times. I just had to pick myself up. I had to keep going. I had to get back in the chair. I had to, educate myself about publishing. I had to find an author community because it's very important. And I made it happen, and you can't get hung up on those types of like USA Today bestseller lists and New York Times bestseller. It is a journey. It is a marathon. It is not a race. So that's the story that I'm most proud of, is that I was able to do it without having that, milestone.
Well, that's truly inspiring. I just feel like a lot of authors need to have that thick skin, and they go through that sort of similar journey.
I don't know an author, even now, and I'm friends with, New York Times bestselling authors and USA Today, and every single one of us, every single day alternates between being miserable, being challenged, highs, lows. It is never the way it appears on social media. It is a very difficult, challenging business, and you have got to be prepared for a lot of like kicks to the knees that knock you down. And you have to, the best thing I can give a newbie author is have the skills to pick yourself up again.
So true.
Give yourself 24 hours to mope and be miserable. I need to take my own advice. Give yourself 24 hours, 48 hours to mope and be miserable, and then use that rejection or whatever it is, disappointment, to fuel your flame.
Yeah. So I have a question to you about life balance, because I know for myself as an author with deadlines and as a wife and a mom, it's just so difficult to juggle all those balls in the air. And so are you somebody who's very, first of all, what are your deadlines? Because I feel for mine, each draft is like 6 to 8 weeks, and that's not long enough for me to get a really good story out. So I would like to know about that. And then second of all, are you very organized? Are you good about kind of limiting your time with getting what you need to get done, in terms of housework and writing? Are you organized?
Well, yeah, way? all my friends and family hate me because it's always, I have, how you have those automatic texts, like when somebody calls you and you hit mine is writing, can't talk, I'll call you when I break, and they must just like hate me at this point. Like, don't send me this stupid text. So my writing schedule and balance has changed and evolved as my children have grown up. I have twin boys who are now 25, and when they were babies, I would write while they were sleeping during the day. I did not write on the weekends, and I did not write at nighttime. And then that evolved as they got older to, when they were in elementary school, and then when they had sports after school. So my schedule has always, they're my number one priority. And my husband, we can't forget about him. The husbands are like down here on the totem pole. It's like, right. And they're so supportive. So I shouldn't say that. But so my writing schedule and my work-life balance has shifted through the years. So now I'm an empty nester, and I literally will write all day long. Like, I will wake up, I will do something like exercise-wise to just stretch and get my mind going. And then I can write all day long. And then, my husband comes home from work, and then I'm like, I need to get out of the house, and like we go out for dinner. Like, that's it. Yeah. But, then my kids come to town, adjustments are made. I work really well on a deadline. If you give me like a lot of time, like if you say, oh, Rochelle, just, start writing your next book and just get it back to me, I will wait till the very last minute. So I need a deadline to just keep me going and motivated. I work really well with an accountability partner. I've worked with Camille DeMaio a few times, and we have a Google sheet that we we put in our word counts. Like we have goals for specific, like my goal was like 1,500 a day for 5 days a week. And I would give myself weekends if I didn't get my word count during the week. But my edits are typically 3 weeks, like the passes, they give us 3 weeks and it's really intense.
Yes.
And I'm like a lot of writers, I'm really hard on myself. We have self-imposed deadlines that just also sometimes supersede the ones that the publishing house gives us. And I would never want to be that author that's like, I need an extension. Like I will forego, I'll forego life completely to get it done, which isn't always good because I feel like sometimes you're compromising quality at that point.
Yeah.
But it
fascinating.
Yeah.
And
so
I'm sure everyone has a different process, right? But it's interesting as we interview each author to see how they operate in between all of that writing. It's fascinating to me.
I mean, I'm not writing. I turned in my 9th book to my agent a month ago. So I've had a month of like launch, like promotional stuff, and I haven't been writing, and it's been great. I have to tell you, I'm like, I could do this. Like, it's been like, I mean, I've had a book launch, so there was that piece of it, but not writing and editing. I mean, but I'm kind of getting ready to go back to it.
Yeah. Do you have somebody who you hire to market for you, or is that something you take on yourself?
So I've worked I use Anne Marie with Get Red PR for my PR. And there's Heather on top of that marketing. I think it's on top of that marketing. She does some marketing for me. I'm pretty savvy when it comes to this stuff, and I've worked with other authors on doing promotions and contests, and I'm always trying to think outside the box. Like, it's so hard to get visibility in this business, and it's harder than like now, like coming back to what I was saying earlier about the business changing so dramatically. Like, there were weeks, I don't know how to say this, but where some of my books, like my self-pub books, did better than my published books with like Amazon. And it's because the marketplace is so different right now, and discoverability is harder than ever. There's more books than ever. There's book talk. There's bookstagrammers. Like, it's not like you're not comparing apples and oranges to, what I did self-publishing back then to like what's going on in the publishing world today. It's really hard, like really hard.
Well, speaking of book talk, I was trying to usually, we jumped into recording with you so fast I didn't even get a chance to say, hey, if you have an extra book laying around, send it to me so I can read it before we record. I couldn't find your book. So I go to Target, and speaking of book talk, they have a whole section, #book talk.
Yeah.
And I want to go back and do a video of it because there's not a single Jewish author on there, which we've heard some things about book talk and how they were, after October 7th, just all of a sudden not including Jewish authors and things like that. I stood there, and my husband actually was there, but he had to come back and get me because I was shocked. I was looking up names of each book they have to see if they're Jewish. Not a single Jewish author. I've been to 3 different Targets. I cannot find your book, and I can't find a lot of Jewish authors' books. So
okay, so I am an Amazon author. I am part of their publishing house, their imprint. So not finding me in Target is probably nothing to do with Judaism, and more to do with the fact that Amazon is their high priority is ebooks in the Amazon store. But I hear what you're saying, and the book talk piece is probably more indicative of maybe what's going on in the world.
Oh yeah. But it was so I guess talking about all of that, and I have so many questions. I'm trying to pace myself. But I did have a question about the theme of the titles. Did you always know you wanted to have a certain theme going, like What We Leave Behind, When We Let Go, which this was the book that I emailed you, and I'm buying so many books that my husband's like, go to the library. Just go to the library for all the books. You know, you're spending so much money on a book, which to me, that's my, you know, wealth. I have a whole stand-up special about my dad saying our generational wealth coming from Soviet Russia are books. Here, there's your generational wealth, you know. But to me, this is very important. But going back to the titles and the theme, did you ever have that in mind that I'm going to have a certain theme for all the books, or just kind of
No, I don't know. My titles came pretty easily to me. The only 2 titles out of 8 books were changed by the publishing house. They were my original titles, and that was the 3rd book, Where We Fall, which was called Lake Coffee because it was based on this lake in North Carolina, and I just slapped that on the book until I could think of something, and that's what I sold it on. And then the most recent book, We Are Made of Stars, was called The Inn. Same reason, because it was based on an inn, and I just like slapped on the name The Inn. So at that point we've been keeping it in line with like, it's like the who, what, where, when, why, how of like titles. Like, so we kept it in line with that theme. But I have a title for my next book, but it's a little different. I don't know if they're going to keep it.
Interesting. Okay.
Can we find out what it is?
It's funny. It's called I Wish I Never Met You.
Oh, I love that.
And have you ever seen those wishing trees, like where people, okay, so you read When We Let Go, and I don't know if you're going to remember this, Julia, but there was the wishing tree in the book, and it was a real wishing tree in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, where people came up and wrote their wishes on a white card and they stuck it up on a tree. And what's so crazy is that the store next to it ended up burning down, and the trees remained with all the wishes. So that was like in the midst of COVID, and I came back to Miami and I said, we really need to find a place for a wishing tree, because I feel like the world was just so broken during COVID, and we needed just community and togetherness and hopes and dreams. And so the Aventura Mall in Miami, I don't know if any of you know about it, they had this like courtyard, and they had these massive trees, and I got them to do the wishing trees. So I was there one night, and I saw some really graphic wishes that were completely inappropriate. Like,
that's hilarious.
Like sexual.
I wish I, whatever. And then I moved over, and it said, I wish I never met him. And I said, I spoke to me, and I was like, writer, you're a don't you just, there's a whole story there in those words.
Exactly.
I wish I never met you. So I literally wrote the story to that title.
That's amazing. Isn't that amazing? I always love hearing what inspires writers, and something as simple as just seeing one sentence can really inspire an entire story. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I felt it deep in my heart. Like literally, I was like, that's my next story.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. Well, and that's when I emailed you that night as I was reading that book, When We Let Go. I keep pulling it up to show people know the names, but I'm a very visual person. So I'm sitting there reading it, and I think because, the characters and the father, the mother passed, and so all they have was the father. And obviously to me it was touching because I just lost my dad, but so I'm bawling for multiple reasons, and drinking, so that didn't help. And in my head, I'm like, I wonder how she comes up with not just the storyline, but the grief, the trauma, the situations. Is it something that is, well, obviously can't all be solely because of your personal experiences, right? Where do you find that? How do you just come up with that? What is the process of finding and the research that you do on specific situations, specific trauma?
Okay, so a lot of that is, experience with different types of loss in my life. I lost my mother to pancreatic cancer, so there's that piece. And I lost my father when he left, when I was a baby. So, there's people don't just have to die for you to feel grief and loss. Like there's pain associated with goodbyes. So, like most people, I've had my share of goodbyes, and I'm just I am a self-proclaimed old soul. I think I feel things very deeply, and I'm an observer of human behavior and the human condition. And I like to understand people, and I like to understand what makes them tick. And I especially like gray areas where, I'm not black and white. I'm a very gray human being, and I like to show multiple sides of a situation because I believe that, I know this is going to sound like so self-righteous and whatnot, but I believe that the world would be such a better place if we showed more empathy and compassion for people. And just because some people do things differently than we do them, it doesn't mean that we're right and they're wrong, and vice versa. So I choose topics, and I choose situations and themes that are sort of gray, but I like to show both sides. And as far as going into the research and the emotions and whatnot, I literally get into character. I become the character. And it's very easy for me to slide into those feelings. And I dig deep into, some old wounds, childhood wounds and whatnot. What happened with my writing is when I started writing novels is when I stopped writing in my journals.
Wow.
And that was no coincidence. Like I was literally channeling a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions into my books. Yeah.
I'm writing this down because I think this is very powerful. And for a lot of people that need to write things down, my oldest, who's 25, my son, just started doing that, which she's going to hate me for saying this out publicly, but he doesn't listen, so it doesn't matter, But he said,
see that? He should be listening, and then he would know.
no, but he said, and he told me, Mom, you should do this if you're not writing something, because, I'm not a nonfiction writer. Fiction writer. I'm not someone, the book that I wrote was a very kind of autobiography about our life coming to America. It was funny short stories that were mostly about my dad. And so to me, I think this is very powerful, that what you just said, that when you started writing novels, you stopped writing in a journal. I don't know, for me, there's
telling
something
people, like, I'm not recommending don't go to your therapist and don't write in a journal and just start writing books. There needs to be, again, like the balance. Like I did a ton of therapy on my whole life, and I wrote in journals and I was ready to make this next step. But yeah, like I'm real, and I think I try to be authentic. So I try to capture the real authenticity of emotions and feelings in my books.
And then speaking of powerful messages and exactly what you were just saying, I quote you a lot, and I hope this is something that you did say, but I think about you every day. I'm pretty sure you said this, where you said you write things as the way you see them, but also as the way you want it to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I created that, but I do say that a lot because in a lot of my characters, they are me. There's a piece of me in a lot of my characters and people in my life. Everything is fictionalized, but I write who I am and what I know and what I wish that I could be. Like sometimes, like, it's funny, like you might be surprised that when I say this, but sometimes I look at like my strongest, like I look at Cecilia James, and she was in What You Do to Me, and I felt like she was such a strong character, and I wanted to be her. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like she was also struggling with like pain from her father's, abandonment and whatnot. So,
yeah,
it's a mix of reality and what we wish for ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of which, I really wanted to talk about that book because, the big thing is, can we talk about the band Plain White Tees? Because when I read, the book, and then I started research, I always go and I start doing research in every book I read because I want to know the backstory. And the more it's based somewhat on real life, the more interesting it is to me. I don't know why. So when I hear that it's a story, the author's story, or she dealt with something like your book,
Right.
Heidi,
Right.
Unorthodox Love, I'm like, there's got to be something about her in there. And I keep telling her that I totally see her running like a very, a boutique, a clothing store that is for Orthodox women. That is, but they can also feel pretty and girly and dress up, because every time you post pictures of you being dressed up somewhere or just going out anywhere, even with your fur lip coat thingy, I was like, oh my God, she's so fashionable. Because I don't have fashion sense. I just slap crap together.
Yes, you do. What are you talking
don't
about?
believe
Look
you.
at you.
I hope it
I
sticks.
don't believe
I
you.
just hope it sticks, My question was about how that whole thing came about, the idea for a book about based on a song, I guess, a band, and the fact that you actually reached out to Tom Higgins, right? He's the
Higginson, yeah.
Higginson, yeah, for Plain White Tees. How did that come about?
So I always loved the song "Hey There, Delilah," and just being a curious person, I Googled what the song was about, like the inspiration for the song, and I felt it was this just like sultry love song, and there was such like a yearning and a pining. So I learned the story that Tom Higginson met Delilah in a bar in Chicago. And he basically told her he was going to write her a song, and he did. And she had a boyfriend at the time, and she wasn't interested. But the song ended up coming out, and it was a Grammy nominee. And even though some people thought that it was a little stalkerish for him to write her a song and whatnot, I thought it was actually one of the most romantic things in the world. And she probably didn't mind either, because she ended up going to the Grammys with him. But they didn't end up together. And me being a sucker for a love story, I was just so disappointed. I was like, what do you mean? Like, he wrote this song for her and he loved her and all this emotion. And how could she not be madly in love with him? So I just had this idea that I wanted a little bit of a departure from my earlier works, and I wanted something a little bit more high concept and more challenging. And I just basically said, I'm going to reinvent the story behind the song with wholly different characters and a wholly different ending. And I used my contacts for when I was in the music industry. One of my best friends, Doug Cohn, he got me in touch with Tom, and I literally stalked Tom every single day. And I still stalk him. But he was amazing, and I got the lyric approval through Warner Chappell, and then he wrote the foreword for the book, and then he even agreed to do some promotions for us, online. Like, he did literally my publishing house gave him a script, and he videoed himself, and he talked about the book, and he played the song. I mean, it was like priceless. So he did that for me. And that was What You Do to Me. And it's the story of a Rolling Stone reporter on the hunt for the muse behind this famous love song. And it's based on the Hey There, Delilah.
I think it's
strong Jewish representation.
Yes. And that was going to be my next question to you is, I love that it's, first of all, they're there. Obviously, the Jewish representation is there in the books. It's not so in your face, like it's all Jewish. It's there. It's subtle. This book,
Right.
Yeah, there was quite a bit more. But I love that there's that balance of like that it's not just for Jewish readers, it's just so much Jewishness that
Right.
to
So I'm a Jewish author, as you know, but my first book, I think, had Jewish and non-Jewish. My second book had Jewish. My third book had no Jewish. My fourth book, I can't even remember. But every book, like, I don't only write Jewish characters and Jewish themes. I write books through my Jewish lens, like the way I live my life and the way I was raised. But not every one of my characters has to be Jewish or the Jewish themes. And I'll tell you, What You Do to Me had a strong Jewish representation, and it came out on October 17th, and it was just like such a devastating time to put a book out, and it was it was really just disappointing to put that book out. And the new book, We Are Made of Stars, I don't remember if it was a conscious decision or not. I don't have a single, there is one Jewish character, but it's like, you wouldn't even know it, but he's so awful in the book. But I don't know if it was a conscious decision. I think that I was really scared to write another Jewish book. And I've actually grappled with this, and I actually talked about this at the Hadassah luncheon about my decision not to have any Jewish characters, like outright Jewish characters. But I also think this is Rochelle Weinstein being hard on herself again, because I don't always write Jewish books. You know, this is along the lines of what I write, and I write what speaks to me at any given time. And that's what spoke to me. And you know what? Reading is for escaping, and maybe I just needed to escape inside this story.
Did you have any review bombings because of your Jewish characters?
I didn't have the review bombings like Lisa Barr and Talia Karner, but I was on, the blacklist. I was on the Google spreadsheet that was color coordinated. Code red was the worst offense.
I was on that too. I loved it.
Right. Yeah, so I was on, my offense was that I put the Israeli flag in my feed on October 7th. Yeah. So listen, I mean,
yeah. It's so, and I see the pain and being conflicted about writing Jewish characters or not. And the other day I remember telling my husband, not a single person had any second thoughts when Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And I, along with a lot of Jewish women, a lot of Jewish people, jumped on it, right? We were out there volunteering. I was up all night in the Russian chats. Russian speaking chats, translating, trying to see how we can help. We were getting people out, and nobody had a single thought about putting a Ukrainian flag. With Israel, it's all of a sudden political. And I made a post, and I've gotten private messages, and people were questioning things. And mine was that what is so political about babies being burned alive, about people being killed, raped, tortured, taken hostages? Someone non-Jewish commented and said, and I was so close not to go off on her. Well, maybe it's because Benjamin Netanyahu is just not very popular. So
I feel like I saw a lot of comments like that.
What does that have to do with 9-month-old baby, a 4-year-old being taken hostage and then killed with bare hands? What does a president's popularity have to do with anything? So I'm sure you've dealt with your share of things, right?
Yeah, so we dealt with the list that was going viral, and there are some Instagram accounts that are, the Zionist accounts, and it's about, if you buy from this particular author, you're supporting Zionism. So I'm on that one. I did a panel at the Miami book, was it the book fair? Yeah, at the Miami Book Fair this past November in Miami with Dara Levan, Karen Blankfeld, and Zibby Owens, and who else was supposed to be in it? I'm drawing a blank. Me, Dara, Zibby. Yeah, okay, it was the four of us. And Zibby had an emergency and couldn't come, and Lisa stepped in. And it was almost like the share, like a blessing that Lisa stepped in. And not that Zibby wouldn't have handled it well, but I mean, anyone who knows Lisa Barr, she is like the warrior. She is out there fighting the fight. And it was just like the right person to fill in. And we had some intimidators in pro-Palestine shirts in the audience. And, they basically stood up and they were hassling us about, you call yourselves Jewish women, but, what about all these innocent children in Palestine dying and being killed, and babies and whatnot? And Lisa basically she stood up and she just said, and I'm quoting my friend, she said, nobody wants to see innocent children and babies killed. Nobody. But and The hostages need to be freed.
Exactly.
And I love her distinction, no but, and. But, you know, it's just.
Thing. Yeah, I was thinking about how it's such a black and white world, and people, if we put in the gray, we would. Yes, sorry, go on.
Right. No, you're 100% correct. I mean, I put an Israeli flag. I don't want to see innocent children die. And it's just, listen, I'm a believer that so many of our issues and our problems are social media and the internet, because I feel like just everybody has a mouthpiece now, and it's just, there's too much noise, there's too much information, there's too much wrong information. Right. And I just feel like, I don't even know, it's like trying to put the toothpaste back in the container. Like, I don't know how we get back to a more wholesome, traditional way of living. I think that the world is a little scary right now.
Right.
And I'm not talking politics, because I won't, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that, I just, like, I miss the days, and I'm aging myself, but I miss the days like nightly news, and you would get your unbiased news. And like now everybody's a newscaster, and everybody's, knows everything. And I just feel like it's too much information. It's too much information.
I say that every day. I want to go back to the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. When I want to go back to the 70s.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was a baby. So yeah, I mean, I was born 76. So yes, that would be great.
But no, I'd like to be my age today, but in the 70s.
Yes. I think that the biggest thing is, like you said, it's social media. And, as a matchmaker who is no longer really taking on many clients because I'm so burned out because of social media, and because people have become just so shallow, and always next, who else do you have, it's like I had one guy who went through 18 women in a matter of 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And none of them were good enough for him. So I think in every industry, we all struggle because of social media, because of technology. I want to go back to flip phones. It took you 10 minutes to write 2 words as a text, which we didn't spend time on our phones, and I saw a thing the other day that said how to stop Mel Robbins. I think it was her, which, I have issues with her too, but she was interviewing someone. I mean, we have issues with everyone now, but she was saying something that someone told her, oh, all you have to do is get on your phone and change the screen to grayscale. So everything is in black and white and there's no color, and your brain is just going to get bored scrolling through your phone. So you just won't be.
Oh, interesting.
And I wanted to come and say, or how about we just become adults and stop being on our phones so much, and all these likes and how many followers and this and that, and we have kids, so we know what that's like, right? My kids go through that too.
It's a catch-22, and it's a love-hate, because we need it if we want to stay, I'm
relevant.
Thank you. Yeah. If you want to stay relevant, you need to be engaging, and the more you engage, the algorithm, it's like the rabbit hole. But I admire a lot of authors that just come out of their holes during launch week, and then they go back into their holes, and and some of them are able to do it because they're at that level of success, but not everybody's at that level of success, and you want to remain relevant, so it's just a tricky business. And
yeah, well,
even oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, like, even Jennifer Weiner, I think of as super successful. I think she's still very active on her social media. I don't know. I just find it
Jodi Picoult.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's a necessary evil, right? Necessary, unnecessary. How's the saying go? Unnecessary
evil. It's a necessary evil.
Which I think it was just the world that we live in. But because if it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't have known about so many amazing books. I follow a lot of the Jewish accounts after October 7th, because we talked about in previous podcasts with Heidi that I was one of those people that supported every story, every voice, especially Black, LGBTQ, everyone, immigrant, Hispanic, Latino, women. And I bought every book. I mean, this is like a tiny
Yeah.
fraction,
Yeah.
right? And then we find ourselves alone.
Same.
So, but because of social media, I found so many amazing authors and their books, and I was able to reach out and interview them, Jewish authors, because I never saw myself represented in any of these books except for the immigrant books. Yes, I understand the struggle, but that's where it ended, and I
Right.
wanted to support them. But I think a lot of us struggle now because when I read a book that's not by a Jewish author, I'm waiting for that, you know, low key anti-Semitic comments, and then I'm done with the book. It's always somewhere, oh, he's just a Jew, or he's this, or she's that, and there'll be a comment in there. And almost every book I've ever read and novel, or there's no Jewish characters at all. So it's a struggle, it's a struggle for, I think, for a lot of us nowadays.
Well, thank you for your support of all people.
I'm trying. It's not easy right now, right? When nobody else is supporting us, when we're standing alone. But
this is who we are, and they go low and we go high. I just feel like that's the Jewish culture, and we
right.
can't change. We can't change who we are.
And somebody was saying how it's so much easier to spread hate than it is to spread love, for example. And it's sad but true.
Yeah. I think, one of the things too that I'm learning from my children, which is kind of crazy, we raise these kids and then they teach you lessons. And, they constantly tell me, Mom, if you're going to pick a fight with some pro-Palestinian, whatever, on social media, at least have all your facts first, because you sound like a crazy woman, just, and I do, but there's that anger, and I think it's really hard not to just go, well, fuck you, like just
Yeah, I know.
And so now I try to, their voices are in my head, and I try to like instill a little education, instead of going off, let's try and educate them a little bit, right? But it's exhausting. Like there was a whole post going around for a while that Jewish people are exhausted. We are exhausted to have to defend ourselves, have to explain everything, have to educate everyone. And all I can tell people is try reading some of these Jewish books. There's nothing more educational than reading about Jewish characters.
It's to your point, exactly what you just said is when I put the Israeli flag in my feed, why did I have to justify that by saying that I don't want to see innocent people dying? Like, why is it inherently just something negative that we're bad and evil? Like, and that's where some of this exhaustion comes in, and having to justify who we are.
Right.
I'm curious, Rochelle, have you lost friends since October 7th in the author world? Because I know I have.
I don't know that I've lost, friends is also a tricky term in this business, because a lot of it is like, I mean, look at you and I have known each other online, and this is the first time we're face to face.
We're besties, just by
we're
the way.
besties. We are besties by virtue of
I love you, Heidi.
I have been disappointed in silence amongst some of the people in our community, and I don't know that I will ever see them the same way.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed. I promised myself I wasn't going to watch the Oscars. I did, and I wanted to throw things at the TV, and my husband was like, I told you not to watch it, and he used
I
to
didn't really watch it. I watched the opening act, and I was happy watching the opening act, and then I didn't watch anymore. Yeah. Oh, I saw, and I weirdly caught Adam Sandler because, it was just such a great moment because we all love Adam Sandler.
Like you could have said so much right there, right? There could have been something, And again, that disappointment that all these Jewish actors just silent, except for Gal Gadot, who was almost banned from going there. But even and i- i- as someone who was, my husband was in the entertainment industry for many, many years, and he did special effects, and he's actually won an Oscar and Emmy, and he hates
That's
me bringing this
amazing.
up. But I'm like,
Congratulations.
That's amazing, Julia. Why have you never told me that?
I know.
That's a fun fact.
He's like,
Yeah.
please don't say that. It was many years ago. This was before social media. This was, 80s, 90s after college. And even now I tell him, for me, selfishly, I was like, get back into it, because he started making video games and he left the entertainment industry. But I'm like, can you get back into it? I want to, we'll live in LA, we'll live in Orange County, we're far away, well, with traffic. And he's like, no, I don't want to go back to, did you see this? This is what it is. It's all about money. It's all about, power and influence. And they don't care. They just want their career to be there. They're all scared, so
you sell your soul out there in a lot of
yes,
ways.
it's disappointing. It's very disappointing, but
I
it
went
is.
to the Oscars once. I wonder if that's when your husband won. It was 1990. It was 93, I think.
So when he won for Total Recall, well, his company, he worked on Total Recall with Schwarzenegger. So
Let's see when that was out.
I'm gonna have to, yeah. Well, and it was that scene they did special effects, the animation, the scene where he walks through the X-rays. Do you remember the X-ray machine where they're walking like skeletons? So that's what him and his company worked on. But
So that movie came out in 1990. So I'm
yeah,
guessing that it was the award shows in 1991. So I was
right,
92. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So,
It was close.
What were you
yeah.
doing there in 1992?
When I worked for the LA Weekly and the film studios and the record companies were my clients. One of my clients was the American Cinematique, I think, something like that. And he took me as his plus one. And
Wow.
I was in the elevator with Bette Midler. That was like my best memory.
Oh
But
my
we were like in
I
we were
love
in the
that.
we were in the nosebleed seats, and it's so much less glamorous in real life
Yeah.
because it's live TV and you have to they signs to be quiet and you can't talk and you can't go to the bathroom. And it's just
Oh my
it's
God.
And
kind of
back
long.
then, yeah, they had seed fillers back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm sure they still do now, but we went to the academy, the television academy, the Emmys, and he took me and my parents. This was the year we were married. This was what, 97. It was the last year for either Seinfeld or Friends. Seinfeld. It was the last year for Seinfeld. So, we had to go. And I went into the bathroom during the show, even though they wouldn't let you go at that time, you couldn't leave. Maybe they didn't have seat fillers then. And I just had to go. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going, See my beautiful red dress here, So, and we were sitting kind of far back. And we run to the bathroom. I go in, there's nobody there because the show is going on. I see there's one stall taken. As I'm approaching, this woman leaves the stall, and it's Jennifer Aniston.
Oh
And
wow.
Oh my God.
my face was like, such a fan. And my husband had to
Yeah.
have a conversation with my mom and me before we went, like, look, this is only for peers. Please don't be a fan. Don't embarrass me. Don't ask for the autograph.
Right.
Because back then it wasn't like selfies and pictures, it was autographs, right?
Right.
So it was 98. Yeah. So, and my face must have been like a horror of like, such a fan. So she thought I was going to go and attack her for something. So she just like panicked and bolted out of there. She didn't wash her hands. She just bolted out of there, and she had two bodyguards standing right outside, and they had the door open because they wanted to see, her.
Oh my God.
And I just turned around and what the hell am I going to do to you? Attack you in the bathroom, Jennifer? And she
That's
just
great.
and she was like, I think she didn't expect that, And I was like, geez, I just wanted to pee. I didn't expect to see you here. So I was a little shocked,
Oh my
But
gosh.
anyway,
If
that
I
was
had
the
been
last
there,
time.
Oh
That's
my God.
great. That's a great story.
I think if I had been there, I would have gone straight to the men's bathroom and just been like talking to everybody.
Well, that was the last time he took us to any kind of award show. But before we let you go, because I know we can continue on for another hour, I'm curious what you think about the numerology because I run it for all of my guests. And if you don't want to talk about that's fine too. But I'm curious to think what you thought about your numerology chart. And have you ever
Okay.
had it?
I looked at that day and then I haven't looked at it since. And the way my memory is, it's so bad. But I will tell you what I do remember was it was spot on about my spine because I have such back problems. There were a couple of things that resonated with me. Listen, I'm into all that stuff. Like I used to be like addicted to the astrology. And like I think that there's this feeling within all of us of like wanting to understand and wanting to sort of like I don't want to go to a psychic. Like I don't want to go that far, but I want to know. I want to know something. I want to know like something that's bigger than me. Like that makes sense of some of my decisions or my hangups or I don't know, it's sort of like validating when you read something like that. Like, yeah, this makes sense. Like, yeah, like I love stuff like that. But again, I don't want to know like psychic stuff. Like I don't want to
I get it. Yeah, no, it's very true. I think it's 80 to 90% correct and accurate, I should say, not correct, accurate. And it's just to me, it's fascinating. I run it for everyone, but I'm always interested to see what people think about it, you know?
No, I think it's so interesting. Like I had Linda Goodman's love signs like in college and after college where this big fat book and compatibility between Aquarius and Sag and this one and I was like obsessed with that stuff. Like I felt like I needed to just have like some like clear path of, where I needed to go.
Right. Well,
but that stuff's really interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, the thing, especially not to go into numerology, but astrology is all based on stars, what time you were born, where the stars are, where the moon is. With numerology, it's all based on your name and your birth date, and that's why a lot of celebrities actually will pay a lot of money to famous numerologists to pick their babies' names, not just celebrities, wealthy people, because that defines your whole life and your birthday, when you were born. So it's pretty fascinating. Yeah. But anyway,
I appreciate it. I thought it was great. I have to go back and read it. And you had asked me something in an email, so maybe we can I'll maybe respond to that.
Yes. Well, I asked you about the storyline of, I don't even remember exactly what I asked you because I was drinking, but I was also just reading the end of the story about in When We Let Go. So my question was, how do you come up with like what I asked you earlier, the fact that there's certain mental conditions and things that happen triggers PTSD, trauma, right? So that was my question to you. Like, how did you come up with that and where do you draw from?
So I'm very vocal about having had a severe anxiety disorder from the age of 8 till I was 21. That's when it was diagnosed. So that was my personal trauma. Like everyone has a different form of trauma. And I tap into those feelings and those emotions because I did a tremendous amount of work to get through it. And not everybody has the ability to get the help that they need, and they struggle. And I've always felt that my stories are to entertain, but they're also to teach. And if I could help somebody, if they can see themselves in my words, if they can see themselves in a situation, if maybe it could offer a shred of advice or help for them or assistance or support. So there's a lot of that thread in my stories. But as far as the Oliver storyline, sometimes it's to entertain, sometimes it's to teach, sometimes it's to tell, sometimes you also need like a big, surprise twist.
Right.
So, you have to just,
There was a twist.
there was
I
a twist,
wonder.
and it's just about, your, flexing your creativity and your imagination.
Yeah. I wonder how many people saw that twist coming and how many didn't. Did you hear? Have you heard?
Some did, like some, listen, in my newest book, someone wrote, the one that just came out a week ago, someone already wrote, like, I figured out, the big twist in the first pages. I mean, some people figure it out. Some people, listen, some people, they say they figure it out, but what that really means is they think they figured it out. And then, I believe they still keep flipping pages because they want to be sure.
Right.
And
And what?
I read books, I read books all the time, and I'm like, oh, I think so and so is so and so. But it doesn't hurt the story for me. Like, that doesn't bother me because I feel like I still want to know. Like, I'm like, was I right? Was I not right?
Right.
So I don't think that's such a big deal when people tell you that. It doesn't bother me.
Oh, good. Yeah. I think it's also, to me, at least when I'm reading books, novels, it's about, I want to know what the author meant. It's like watching a show, a TV show, like Lost, right? You finish Lost and it's like, well, I think I know what this was about, but what did they mean that it was about? That's why there's always that question. And I go online and I start researching, what did the author really mean? So to me, that's so interesting, and to talk about and discuss it. And I was in a book club when we were reading your What You Do to Me book, because I recommended the book. It was my turn to recommend a book. I wasn't really invited back. It just kind of, yeah. So I still don't, I don't know what happened. There was a lot of stuff going on. It was during COVID and we didn't get together to really discuss it. But everyone was telling me that they were so, into the book, like they just couldn't stop reading. They had babies. Some people had, commitments, and they were like, oh my God, I'm cooking and I'm reading. And it was like, was it because there were Jewish characters in it that you guys just kind of said, oh, we're not continuing the book club? I don't know if they did or not, but I hope not, which is,
Hope not.
you
I
never
don't know.
know. But I
My
want people
sister was
to.
such a fan. Like, she said to me, "Oh my gosh, you're interviewing Rochelle today. I just loved her book."
I know.
Oh, well, please tell your sister thank you. And
Aw,
I
yeah.
just love her and I appreciate the support. Where's your sister?
Well, she's in Minneapolis near me. She's
That,
like,
where are you?
she was like
Are you,
freaking out.
where do you live?
Me in Minneapolis,
Oh,
Minnesota.
okay. So you're both in Minneapolis. And where are you, Julia?
I'm in California, in Southern
Oh my
California.
God, I'm in Miami. We are like all over.
Yeah, I know. It's just crazy, right? So that's the best part about technology, is that we can actually bring people together, because I can't imagine interviewing all the authors from all over the world. And the one thing
Right.
I wanted to mention when we were talking about the wishing tree, I actually saw more of them in Europe. When we've
Oh,
traveled
wow.
through Europe, I've seen them. Yeah. It's just so interesting. But anyway, I know we can continue talking to you, and we absolutely are just so happy that you joined us. We'd love to have you back and talk more about your newest book. And I'm going to go and try to find it.
You can get it on Amazon.
Yes, that's my next step. I thought I would just, go and pick it up in person. But the best
Maybe
thing,
bookstore, maybe.
yeah, the best thing about your books are just how real the stories feel, how emotional they are, and they're not the typical sappy, the same romantic comedy, because they're not all about romance. They're not just about the relationship between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, whatever. There's so much to it. There's such a deep, profound story that I know for myself. I think about it for months and months and years later.
Same for me, 100%.
That means so much. I really appreciate that from you both. Thank you. It's funny. I'm going to leave you with one last thing. I had my launch event, and we had like 150 people at this event, and it was a beautiful, great, it was a wonderful night. But I didn't. It's like you're hosting a party and you can't really connect with people. So I was like, hi, oh my God, hi. So I got home and I weirdly felt very much alone. And my husband's like, what's going on with you? And I said, I just felt like I didn't get to connect with anybody. And I think that what you're describing in my books is who I am as a person, because I don't do superficial very well. Like I like depth and I like emotional depth and I like, meaningful conversations. So that was like the worst night for me. Like, I mean, it was the best night, but for someone who's like that, it's the worst night because you don't get to have those like fulfilling connections. So when I was listening to you talk about my books, and of course it's always so like embarrassing to hear that, I'm like, who is this person she's talking about? It really made me think like, that's who I am and who I strive to be, to have meaningful, connections and, none of the bullshit, none of the superficial nonsense. Yeah.
Well, I think that was the biggest reason I started this podcast, because I was so tired of listening, just fluff out there, and although it started out as a matchmaking podcast, and I was interviewing a lot of other matchmakers who were talking about relationships. I got so tired of that. I'm like, how much can you talk about that? I wanted to bring in new voices, interesting people. And, my husband always says, being Eastern European and, Russian, Ukrainian, Latvian, whatever you want to call me. He's like, your people are just so different from the way I'm used to American people being, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish. He's like, I could just tell with your parents when they lose interest because I'm talking about something stupid or shallow. They just stop talking. We're not going to waste time on that, And it's funny because I've had those interviews where I'm like, okay, this is just, I don't need to know this. I don't care. It's just shallow. And I've listened to some of the interviews that you've done, and you could tell where you just kind of like were done with the shallow. So you wanted to talk deeper and you kind of take over the interview, which I think I love that about people, and say, okay, how about, can we talk about this? Let's talk about this, or just, you could just tell that where you're just, I'm not interested in this fake shallow fluff, as I call it,
I go deep very quickly. But I wanted to just thank you both. I think I feel like I made two new best friends. So thank you.
Wow.
Heidi, I'm so
Thank
excited.
you so much for coming
Whatever
on
I can do for you guys, you'll let me know. And we're here to support each other. And I feel very grateful to have such a loving, supportive author community.
Thank you. I will take you up on that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you guys. All
Thank
right.
you
Lots
for
of love
being
to
here.
everybody. Thank you.
You too. Mwah.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share. And even if you didn't enjoy it, share anyway. Thank you for listening, and come back to Someone Had to Say It.